Yifei is a first-year student reading history at Corpus Christi College. Yifei won this slot through open audition. Yifei, the floor is yours.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for coming tonight, and thank you, Madam Speaker, for inviting me into the chamber to speak alongside such esteemed speakers. And it's probably surprising for people who know me to see me here tonight. I'm not in any ways talented at debating. I don't have much experience. I'm not that interested. In fact, the first contact I've had with the Cambridge Union was when I searched it up on Google Maps last Friday to try and get my membership card. But instead, as someone from a village in rural China, this motion is both topical and personal to me. I grew up watching American TV, idolizing American celebrities, and looking towards the country with great respect and admiration. Speaking to Chinese people of my parents' generation, everyone remembers the time when we looked towards America and the West as synonymous with progress, opportunity, and modernity, and when our country was in an endemic state of playing catch-up. And yet, every time I go back home today, what strikes me most isn't the rapid rise in our living standards or the progress of our technology, but the mutual sense of optimism that our future is no longer catch-up, but a collective push into a new global age. And to clarify the motion tonight, the proposition isn't arguing that American supremacy has ended, but that its end is plausible given the current climate. It's not simply enough for the opposition to point to the existence of America's economic or military importance, which we don't deny. These are symptoms of supremacy, but they don't represent supremacy itself. Supremacy as a concept dating back to the Puritans encompassed a faith in leadership. It's a faith that American beliefs are universal beliefs, a faith it can set the world right, and it did this primarily in two ways. First, although national interest always came first, presidents obtained this through ensuring global interests co-aligned with its interests. Take the overthrow of leftist leaders like Arbenz, or the establishment of the Free Trade Washington Consensus. And second, and crucially, supremacy has to be seen as legitimate. Without legitimacy, you cannot have supremacy. And you cannot have supremacy because your status becomes prone to revolt and ends when the balance of power shifts against you. A group of 30 students could be more physically dominant than one teacher, but they're not supreme because their power isn't legitimate. These two characteristics are what the opposition tonight have to prove will last. And personally, as an avid meme connoisseur, it's been funny in internet circles to reduce the argument into one simply of orange man bad. Trump, I would argue, however, is a reaction and symptom of contradictions within the idea of American supremacy itself for three reasons. First, the American population has lost faith in the globalized economy, which has strengthened and legitimized its historical exceptionalism. Second, America has left a leadership vacuum for rivals like China to fill in global crises like climate change or world health. And third, social divisions and the illegitimacy of domestic politics will prevent future administrations from strengthening its international dominance in years to come. But first, what about the economy? American supremacy is often reduced to a sign of material strength, and in some ways that's true. After World War II, America was single-handedly the biggest architect of globalization and economic integration. She both created the system of Bretton Woods, the IMF, the World Bank, and she excelled at it. But after decades of neoliberalism, stagnant real wages, a doubling in the wealth gap, the American people have turned their backs onto the very basis of its former power. With chronic underdevelopment in healthcare in Flint, manufacturing decline along the Rust Belt, and of course, the financial crisis, it's unsurprising that only 13% of Americans had confidence in the state of their nation in July's Gallup poll. Trump's trade war and determination to abandon the WTO can't just be seen as political bargaining tools. They reflect an acceptance that globalization has taken away their past greatness. Back in China, where I'm from, we have problems of our own, of course we do. But right now, the country is designing a Belt Road initiative that links trade across 5 continents, investments over 1 trillion. It has not chosen the easy path to retreat from international responsibility, blame scapegoats, or close its doors to cooperation. The global interest is no longer America's national interest, and if she chooses the latter, she loses her historic privilege of dictating the former. But if the economy doesn't persuade you, maybe politics will. During the Cold War, American supremacy was based on its multilateralism, its role in a dichotomy of good versus evil, its ability to slander the Soviet Union in the same way that China is the evil other today. Now, this narrative is a comforting one. It seemed to make sense back when the Berlin Wall came down, when Fukuyama declared the end of history. America had, largely speaking, succeeded in its aim of containing communism, in overthrowing leaders unaccommodating to its interests, like Mossadegh or Arbenz. It had taken on the responsibility of being world power, and it was able to at least half-heartedly convince us that its power was legitimate because its ideals were legitimate. But for all of Trump's supposed foreign policy triumphs, Israel, North Korea, we have to remember that supremacy isn't just maintaining your interest. It's about persuading people that your interest can be the only interest because it's the global interest. And whilst they could do this against the Soviets, they cannot do this now. The US government has shown just how much it cares about the international community. Despite the current climate emergency, America has turned its back on the Paris Climate Agreement for its own selfish gain. Despite a worldwide pandemic which has killed more American citizens than the last 5 wars combined, America has turned its back on the WHO. It has blamed everyone but itself. It has left a vacuum in leadership because it's a country where lives play second fiddle to profits. Turn the clocks back to April. The US confiscated 200,000 German-bound face masks in a clear act of modern piracy. What did they achieve through this? Well, a week later, the European Commission declared a total ban of any coronavirus-related medicine exports, and India followed suit swiftly after. America fueled a dangerously nationalistic outlook on the international system, and it's no longer able to lead because nations no longer want to be led by it. And finally, let me just quickly turn to the illegitimacy of American politics back home. Once the nation overthrowing foreign governments in the name of democracy, it is now facing constitutional rupture over foreign meddling and corruption in its own presidential elections. Once the nation promoting liberalization, it has been unable to tackle basic issues of healthcare inequality, racial discrimination, and a failing economy for generations. When we're seeing the weaponization of the judiciary, attacks on the free press, the literal deployment of the secret police against peaceful protesters, the debate I think we surely ought to be having is whether America can keep its own democracy intact, let alone lead the world through this system. And the crucial result of this, ladies and gentlemen, is a waning of its historic soft power. Having come out of lockdown 5 months ago, my family and friends back home, for one, are definitely not envious of this sort of society. I mean, we can see this in the trend in the declining number of college applications to American universities, the growing international criticism of it on a world stage. None of us, I presume, are envious of a society where we cannot call an ambulance in an accident for fear of going bankrupt. Few politicians, I hope, aspire to be like Trump, and 52% of Americans themselves no longer believe the government represents the people, according to the Dahlia Research Institute. So as I mentioned at the start, supremacy can only be stable insofar as it is considered legitimate. And America's legitimacy has been on the decline both internally and internationally. It has lost its ability and appetite to shape global consensus, with a public looking inwards now that globalization has left them behind. Corruption, political violence, racial discrimination, stagnant wages, the choice between two presidents no one has faith in. America had the option of choosing cooperation or leadership. It chose neither, and that's why the end is nigh for American supremacy. So I urge you to all side with the proposition tonight. Thank you.